I am fortunate to work in a number of different areas and capacities, but because of the audience here, I'm trying to make it mostly archaeological. We're not going to get into too much of the governance or the planning side of things. But I do want to point out now, in case I don't circle back, that everything that we're doing and talking about here, with archaeology, consulting, academic research, it all has implications for the communities you're working with and for. It's all being built into heritage management strategies. It's all being built into land use plans. It's all being integrated into rights and title ideas. Sometimes even court cases. Everything has an implication. So, the better your work is, the more use it is to the community and the people that you're studying. So
we're going to start. Can I just check the lights, you guys? Because I'm always is that too dark? That's okay? Okay. Sorry.
I've got a lot of pictures, so this is probably the darker the better. I also wanted to say that I've tried to make the topic somewhat broad too. So I'm going to start out talking about the last 12,000 years of prehistory in the Fraser Valley. Look at development of settlement patterning, population, and status, and social relations across the region and even between regions. But then I'm going to focus in on the Harrison River. And on the Harrison River, I'm going to look at bifaces and camas. So there's stone tools, we look like stone tools, and plants, we look like plants. So I hope that there's something for everyone in here. So to begin, the Fraser Valley is a rich area archaeologically. But even now, after a century of investigation, that's really been quite focused for the last several decades. We're still only scratching the surface about what we know about how Coast Salish people have such distinct tribal identities. How these tribal identities have been developed over the last 12,000 years, but then also, grappling with how they have such close relationships between groups and people with people on the coast and in the interior. And then also, so the relationship people have with each other, but also with their landscape, the environment, and the resources. So, with some broad strokes, I'm just going to cover the last 12,000 years. So this is very local talk. Everybody knows the Fraser Valley, right? Burnaby's over here, Burnaby Mountain right there. So the area we're looking at here is from there all the way to the farthest part, the big lake on to the right of the screen there. That's Harrison Lake. So 12,000 years ago, before I go there, these are all of the radiocarbon dated archaeological sites in the Fraser Valley. I think there's 95 of them. Now there's a couple hundred known archaeological sites. So while that sounds like a lot, it's still just a fraction of what's out there. So the earliest sites we know of are Sts'ailes Lake area. There was a marine still stand just over 11,000 years ago. So the oldest sites are on Haley Marine Terraces, between 70 and 80 meters above sea level. Then out there, that's the Milliken site in the Fraser Canyon. That's also an incredibly old site, one of the earliest in this area. And the Fraser River was 20 meters above what it is today. So we've seen a lot of change in the natural environment through this time. So these radiocarbon dates here represent really small settlements. We haven't found any evidence of people living in structures and residences. People probably weren't living here year-round. They look like they would have been just small temporary resource camps. And the material remains indicate a huge amount of movement between regions, probably because they were covering a lot of area in order to make a living, depending on what the resources were at that time. By 6, maybe even 7,000 years ago, we have people building small settlements. So this means that they started living in houses, or at least this is the first evidence that we have of that. Now, even these ones, we don't think that they were living in year-round. It was more like 4,500 years ago, people started living in these settlements year-round. By 3,000 years ago, people were living in really large villages, so over 10 houses within a single village. And they would have lived in these throughout the year. Now, I'm going to also sort of lay the groundwork for some of the social relations because it becomes important when we talk about some of the canvas and the bifaces that we look at up there. So a little over 2,000 years ago, we know that exchange networks really ramped up across the Fraser Valley. There's a huge amount of interaction between people living over here in Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands, and people in the interior of BC, beyond the map there. Now, this corresponds with the presence of a large number of large settlements that also occur around this time. So people have speculated that maybe particularly elites would have, families would have facilitated this broad level of travel across large areas, possibly through marriage arrangements and things like that. Then by 1,200 years ago, so now on this map shows villages in the last 1,200 years. There's a large number of villages, and then what we start to see for the first time is a range in house sizes. So for the first time, you get a lot of big houses showing up, but also smaller ones in behind the big houses. So archaeologists then interpret that as being representative of different levels of status. Something that we've seen in earlier time, but not manifested in a village level, between houses like that. Then around 800 years ago, we see what's probably a big spike in population. So my colleague Dana, you all know Dana, and I have been doing this research together. We've interpreted this as probably being indicative of a time of maybe social change. And some of the ways in which you can see that archaeologically are people start living in new places, such as mid-river islands. You also see a change from below-ground burials to above-ground burials at that time. So something is definitely happening. And then 500 years ago, we see people aggregating into incredibly large villages. So the largest village that we've seen yet. But also, while there's also larger villages, there's indication that there's actually quite small villages. And within those large villages, there's a huge range in house sizes. So not only do we have different levels of status within a single village, but there's also probably different levels of status between villages. So I know I talked a lot about status and stuff, but think about that as we move into the next slides. I also wanted to point out that Dana and I did this work. We compiled almost 600 radiocarbon dates from all of the dated sites throughout the Fraser Valley because we wanted to provide a background for archaeologists to start understanding settlement pattern dynamics, but also as a framework for interpreting other things like how artifacts have changed through that time. How do different regional styles or temporal styles map onto what we're seeing in terms of settlements. Chris Springer is looking at houses. How does archaeological evidence of houses and all the implications of that around social organization and status map onto these kind of broader patterns? Dana's done work on environmental change through time, how there might have been a period of slightly warmer period. Having data presented in this way and kind of a continuous flow allows us to start looking at evidence in this way. So in my job, working for the nations, one way in which I try to promote better archaeology is to make sure that people are collecting radiocarbon dates on a regular basis. It's hard to imagine, but people are constantly telling me that sites that have already been radiocarbon dated don't need to be radiocarbon dated again, even though they're looking at a totally different part of the site. That's not the case. I mean, the radiocarbon date that you have, is representative of that feature that you dated, but not of anything else in the site necessarily. So as you go about doing your work, make sure you continue to collect lots of samples. So the Harrison River. This is the Harrison River Valley. And sorry, it's kind of on an angle I took from a helicopter. This is the community here. This is an incredibly densely occupied area. So within about 2 kilometer stretch, there's 15 large villages. Many of them would have between 10 and 25 houses in them. The villages are along the mountainsides here. They're on an island here, even that little one there. They're here, all the way up the river. It's just, there's a lot of them. A little bit of them over here. So as a community archaeologist, sometimes you deal with somewhat uncomfortable situations. I had heard reports that a gentleman from the community was digging up an archaeological site, and people started bringing in bifaces that he'd given to them as presents. He would put them onto necklaces and was distributed around the community. So I went down to the area where we heard that he was with my boss and a few other people from the community, and we saw him excavating. He disturbed an area about 20 meters squared, and we found these hanging around his neck. So when we walked up, he tried to kind of put them inside his shirt, but my boss wasn't going to have any of that, so we made sure he got them back. We also confiscated over 150 bifaces from this gentleman. He'd taken them home, and as a good archaeologist, he also collected over 30,000 pieces of debitage. I'm not sure what he saw in it exactly. But they were, I won't pretend that they were nicely cataloged and labeled or anything, but they were piled in buckets that allowed me to kind of, move them from his garage to my office and, start looking at them. So we found another, 100 bifaces or so. So this is where he was excavating this little point of land right on this village site here. I'm going to move to the next slide that shows the village quite clearly. So this was mapped by Dana when I first met her and a colleague, Michael Blake and Sue Formosa. They were out here in 2006, I think. So you can see, 12 pit houses. There would have been a plank house here, and this is around where the guy was digging. So those are some of the bifaces. Now, of course, the context isn't great. He really didn't record, stratigraphy. He didn't collect any charcoal samples for me or anything. But what we were able to, we wanted to try to salvage the information that we could. So, we brought some of these to Rudy along with some of the artifacts, the XRF them, and we learned that people were importing raw materials from across the entire Fraser Valley. And then I'm going to get back to this later, but we also later did a controlled excavation immediately adjacent to this, and we found that all of this was happening around 1,700 years ago. So during that first period of major interregional exchange, so just it fits in well with this pattern that people have already, archaeologists have already seen playing out across the region. So raw materials were coming in from the interior, from the coves, Squamish, even Oregon, some of the obsidian. And because it's the manufacturers that were there producing these things in great quantities, we get to see about 200 of the mistakes. Our impression is that these bifaces were being produced for redistribution elsewhere. We've yet to demonstrate that, but we think that with XRF, testing artifacts such as this, we can start to demonstrate how, in fact, maybe this could have been, the center of a web of different relationships, trade relationships. So there's a number of other things besides bifaces here, including quartz crystal. Now I have no idea what the relationship between quartz crystal and bifaces are. Maybe other people do. But the reason I have that up is because just in the last month or two I've become aware of 2 quartz crystal location sources on Harrison Lake. So finding this in the archaeological site is really quite exciting to the community because quartz crystal, it develops in very localized areas. So by going out and identifying the place where it was recovered from, we can make a direct link between the people at that village producing these bifaces and those spots on the landscape. So we went back and we screened all of these back dirt, and as you might have guessed, he wasn't entirely systematic. We managed to find some more artifacts. We also profiled the back wall, and as most people know who worked in the valley, there's often not great stratigraphy. Oftentimes you have middens, from the floor up to the ceiling high, just a fire-cracked rock. Redeposited materials, often full of charcoal and such. That's what this is here. This one's only about 1 meter, but we can see horizontally behind bars, flattened. So as a first pass, we got the 2 dates. We didn't know if this would have all accumulated at one time or if it would have been accumulated over a period of time. So this was interesting. It means that people were more or less using this over the last 700 years. But it also indicated that we couldn't narrow down the time frame at which people were making the bifaces. That's why we went back to do a systematic excavation. So we chose this location here because we knew that we would be able to find some horizontal banding. And as it turns out, we found 8 bifaces, and 6 of them were all along this bottom layer. That's also where we found almost all of the debitage, indicating the biface manufacturer. And it's also where we found all the quartz crystal. If anybody's interested in biface manufacturing sites, or possibly even Harrison River styles of bifaces, and thinking about it in terms of the regional context, think about the Harrison River as an area to do some investigations. There's a huge amount of data out there, some of which is going to be analyzed, others of which isn't. Camas. Thanks to those plant people who've been bearing with me for this. Now we can move on to Camas. So for the last 5 years, Sts'ailes has been trying to restore the slough habitat for salmon. This is one of the richest salmon-bearing rivers in the Fraser system. It's one of the major tributaries of the Fraser River. Huge amount of all 5 or 6 species of salmon come up here. And a lot of them spawn right in the slough channels. But over the last 100 years or so, due to poor forestry practices, they've become silted up. As the Sts'ailes people moved away from the villages further up, they stopped killing all the beavers who have since moved in and created dams that also further clog it up. So now there's woody debris and silt that they're starting to clear out. But clearing it out means bringing in heavy machinery. So we've had the opportunity to do some investigations along the banks of these sloughs in advance of that. So we did a 3D map of this village here, and we started looking around it here. We did a 3D village of an area, map of an area in there too. Whoops. I'll jump back to that. So this is the village on that one. So it's reminiscent of the last one I showed you. It's a different village, but again the same pattern with the plankos out in front. And for scale, we're talking about plankos that are about 100 meters long, or at least a series of conjoined plankos. It's a huge amount of people, like thousands of people living in this valley. Prior to contact, far more than live there now. And so the last village, there was about 12 pit houses. Here, I think we have 8. Another one up there. And we found that, and I was convinced that we had a sort of an isolated pit house with, 3 storage pits or cooking pits beside it. Well, when we tested it, we found it wasn't a pit house at all. So we sent the remains off, or the samples that we left off for formal botanical analysis. And the botanical materials turned out to be some camas. Does everybody here know what camas is? I'll take that as not a unanimous yes. So camas only grows in a few areas in British Columbia and Washington. And in British Columbia, the Harrison is not one of the places it's naturally occurring. The closest would be southern Vancouver Island, some of the other southern Gulf Islands. Is a natural habitat for camas. Camas grows in big open fields. It's a root vegetable. It would have been one of the most important, root vegetables people ate in this area. It was traded very widely, but it was only grown in certain areas. But it had to be very carefully cultivated and tended and harvested. When people harvested, they would harvest. I've got some photos of this. 10,000 bulbs, something like that. A lot of it they would process for later consumption. Once they would get cooked for a couple of days, they could store it for a year or more. But then they also would trade off large amounts of it. So historically, there's records of people moving up, taking canoes full of camas from Vancouver Island up the Fraser River to places like the Harrison or up the canyon, probably to trade, during the salmon run, maybe for marriage relationships. This is what camas looks like when it's fresh. I took that because this is a loaded Coast Salish canoe. It would have been something like that, just thousands of camas bulbs. So this map shows, can you see the CD1 in there, the larger cultural depression? That's where we found the camas. And then this is the stratigraphic profile of it. So from here to here, it's 4 meters. So, very large as far as processing pits go. and it's just chock-a-block full of campus remains. We collected 100% of the sample in this area, and we found about 60 complete bolts of canvas, several hundred fragmentary bolts, and thousands more pieces of just scales. So we think that had we excavated the entire pit, we probably would have found like over a couple thousand canvas remains. So it really gives you an indication of the scale at which people are moving canvas up. But it also indicates that it would have been transported in a raw form. Raw form so that it has to be cooked to be edible. But it also means that there is potential for people in the Harrison or areas around here to try to transplant canvas. So I've talked to Dana about this a little bit, and she's convinced that while the Harrison might not be a natural growing habitat for canvas, people could have established a microclimate that would be suitable. And it might not flourish over hundreds or thousands of years without being carefully maintained. But there's potential for people to be practicing cultivation of canvas on the Harrison too. So to review, I just wanted to circle back to think about how even when you're looking at a single canvas pit or biphase site, there's always the larger regional implications. So the canvas would have come from a long distance away, and it signals these deep relationships that people would have had. And I failed to mention that actually 3 of the pits had canvas remains, and one of them was 2,000 years old, another one, and then the other 2 were dated to about 500 years ago. So correlating with these times when people were living in bigger villages, maybe having increased levels of interaction between regions. So even when you're looking at one small feature within a site, there's oftentimes big implications for regional relationships. I think we can see that with the biphases as well, where they're bringing raw materials from all over, and I think redistributing. And so that what I always like to say is that Coast Salish people are grounded within their tribal territories. That's one of the major takeaways from my work with data and looking at settlement time over the last 12,000 years. And you can see that people became increasingly entrenched in really important cultural and ecological nodes throughout the valley that kind of map onto modern-day tribal territories. Even individual houses, we have evidence for people living in for up to 1,500 years. These are deep connections to places, houses, villages, areas. But cross-cutting all of that, we have a huge amount of interregional interaction through marriage. Allowing people to access resources from all over the place. And it's these 2 sort of different sides of the Coast Salish people that make it so interesting and so complex, trying to tease out these the longevity and the connection to place, but also the relationships that Coast Salish people have, all over the place. And so, maybe as a final note, I've been very fortunate to work on these projects on behalf of the Sts'ailes community, and I haven't been good enough about recognizing all the collaborators. So all the broad context data, Dan and I have been working mostly on over a number of years. Working with also Sufamosa and some colleagues over in Europe. Kevin and Marco, Natasha Lyons has done most of the work on the canvas. Some colleagues have been helping with the biface analysis. Jessica Warren and Nick Weber. But really, the community has been driving it all. They've recognized the implications of all of these different disjointed things that we kind of cobbled together. They recognize that combined they tell really compelling story about the relationship to the land, to each other, to the resources, and they help in terms of preserving it for future generations and educating kids, helping them plan. But I think that I should probably wrap it up there, and I'll field some questions.
Morgan, have you tried to source the canvas? Is there a way to source it using Sts'ailes or trace elements?
Great question. Yeah, there's nothing I want to do more than to get ancient DNA on this canvas. Because there's been a couple of recent papers on genetic signatures of modern canvas, where people have essentially determined that transport really, even though it's described all over the place ethnographically and historically, that transport doesn't play a significant role in the distribution of modern canvas populations. So we have looked at it, but the problem is it's totally charred. I talked to Daniel, when we first did this test, we actually found 2 balls of canvas, and we emailed Danya, and he said, well, if I have a couple hundred, then maybe, maybe we'll get lucky and find some ancient DNA. I just thought, well, 2 bulbs, I can't really justify destroying 2 canvas bulbs for those odds. Now that we've got a couple thousand to choose from, maybe we could sacrifice some of them. But I think, talking with Dana and Chelsea and Donnie some more, it really is a long shot trying to get that. But I'm open to ideas about the still isotope. I hadn't thought of that one.
When they use it to trace deer populations in the American Southwest, I don't know much about it. Bone might be different.
Yeah.
But I think if there was, you might be able to figure out the water source and see if there are differences between the Harrison and wherever these things were grown.
It's an idea. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
What about some isotopes? Oh, wow.
Sounds like you guys are on the same page. I probably should have said it early on. I'm really just kind of a hub. I get to kind of see lots of different projects, but I'm really not the specialist. So, it's great collaborating with people like Dana and you on some other projects. So I'm definitely going to have to keep exploring this. And I think, the value in trying to figure out, where it came from and whether it could have been transplanted and then grown in a microclimate on Harrison, or alternatively being, imported every time, all 3 times, it's pretty significant implications.
You said that the canvas has a pretty specific growing condition, and it's possible that there was microclimates created. Are we confident in what the climate was back then to say that yes, it could actually create those required microclimates?
That's a great question. I'll take a stab at it, and I'll turn it over to Dana. So one of the best proxies for kind of canvas distribution and growing conditions is Gary Oak ecosystems. So that's usually what we use to map out where a canvas could have been. So actually, Dana and her husband have found small karaoke ecosystem in the Fraser Canyon. There's also a small karaoke ecosystem in the Fraser Valley, just south of where we are on Harrison. We don't think that the climate has changed that much, but there's a chance that of a degree or two different. But as Dan has pointed out, there's some real potential for even a degree to have some pretty major implications on growing patterns and such.
Yeah, I was trying to get us to figure out alternative hypotheses. So one is that there's traded, which is supported by the ethnographies and what we know about language and the connection between people on the coast, on the east side of Vancouver Island and the people at Fraser. It's hard for me to imagine, we're talking about the Coast Salish, who were so good at cultivating and manage so many plants. It's hard for me to imagine that if they're getting all these, chemists from over there, that not some smart gardener is going to say, I'm going to do it myself. And I know that we could go theory and say, okay, the Salish did kin relations, and it's really important to have kin relations, but an entrepreneurial person is going to plant it. I'm a gardener, I would be planting it, regardless of kin relations. And I know that camas grows in my garden with no dairy oak around them. And so I just wanted to an alternative hypothesis that some of those camas could have been local sometime to get us to be thinking about the possibility that these guys are great gardeners and we're going to see their effects of the archaeological record. I don't want to always default to trade non-local, non-cultivators, which was the paradigm. So I think we don't know. We're placing no inference.
And it's probably worth noting that while we don't know for sure with camas, cultivation, we do know for sure that they were cultivating other root vegetables.
Yeah.
So it really isn't a great, thing. So they use exactly the same technologies, exactly the same practices as people on the island do. It's just a matter of swapping out.
The thing about gardening, and one of the indicators of traditional gardening is range contraction. So the range of camas today is a reflection of where it's doing well, right? Yeah, it's not where, the whole point of gardening is to push those edges. So you take away people in traditional cultivation processes, you get the range kind of.
That's right. And also,
we don't know.
One of the issues with camas prairies is that it was the best habitat for raising sheep. So when Europeans came, sheep and cows and pigs were all just devouring the camas. A lot of them died too because camas grows with death camas. so without regular cultivation, it became problematic. So the farmers quickly eradicated the camas from their fields. It was just too great a risk. It was also where they would go and plant food crops. So yeah, we're looking at a serious constriction of what would have been traditional camas growing areas. Yeah.
When you mentioned about the man who was digging up the archaeological site, how is that how is that sort of work on the history of the people viewed within the community, and what did sort of punishment, or what did they do or say to him? I was wondering how they viewed their heritage.
That's a good question. The reason he was able to dig up for 20 years because it had been going on for a little while. So some people in the community did know. But when it came to chief and council finding out, that's when I got notified. So I went down with my boss and another colleague, and we're in the Aboriginal Rights and Title office. So when we went down there, we didn't just yank things off the bank and make them give artifacts back. It really was just a process of education. We explained how basically the band's position on recovering artifacts has always been, you can find them on the ground. It's more or less fair game for community members. They're always going to have collections, and you don't want to try to limit something like that. That's as much of a traditional practice as anything else. But when it comes to digging up an intact archaeological site, they drew the line there basically because they felt that the man was erasing part of their history. He removed, the potential for them to learn about, how certain ancestors might have lived or operated. And he didn't know that going into it. He hadn't thought about it in those terms, so he was okay with turning everything over when we explained that by letting us look at things and letting us analyze it, we'll be able to try to salvage some of that information and tell the story. And we also talked about how the artifacts are more rightly belong to the entire community for preservation, community knowledge, and education than to a single individual. He put up a bit of a fuss around that mask, which he quite liked, but everything else he was okay. Especially the demontage, he basically gave him he shot the barter at first. It was, you can have the demontage, just give me everything else back.
Did he explain why he was collecting the demontage?
Yeah, I mean, it was just he knew that it was an artifact. I think he felt a certain responsibility, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, he bagged it, he boxed it all up and moved it back to his house. And he didn't have a car, so he was honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marina, the canvas, that's a lot of canvas that he left. If it's such a valuable resource, why is it in the pits? And what was the intent? So you think that they're doing lithic manufacture and that's going back out again?
Yeah.
So is it the parallel with the canvas? They're manufacturing the canvas or whatever and it's going back out again? Or what's going on?
Yeah, good question. I think you guys can tell I got a little nervous, partway through there. So I didn't go into all the detail I could have with canvas processing, but really what we have here is an in situ, cooking pit with, all the layers intact. So the reason we have so many left is because people just never went back and dug the canvas out again. Or I'm sorry, scratch that. That's not at all true. But what we do have is we have a fuel layer down here. So people would dig a pit, they would add a whole bunch of wood to it. That would be, so they would have hot fire, then they would put a whole bunch of big rocks on top and just layer it all the way across. That's what would do the cooking. And then they would put, packets of canvas, or maybe you just have like mats of grass and whatever down, separated from the hot rocks. And then they would have, more matting over top, and then they would probably put sod or something like that. And then they would have to have a vent that they would add water into to do this steam cooking. So, my mistake, they obviously did come back and grab all the packets of canvas. What we're looking at is the incinerated canvas that probably fell through the cracks. Maybe a packet broke open. And we're looking at some canvas that just charred. Now we don't know if this is, representing just one event or several events where they continually lost these small amounts of canvas. My suspicion is for a pit this size to have that many canvas balls. I know it's taboo to say, but I think it's probably feasting, and then preservation for later. I don't think there's any reason to think that it would have been redistributed necessarily. Maybe a small amount given away, but
Why there?
why here?
Not the next village over, but...
Well, we haven't tested the next village, but I'm sure that's a Wapato.
You sure, eh?
Yeah, why here? I mean, that's a good question. We don't really know. Look, what we do know is that there's really long-term relationships between people on the Harrison, people in the Cowichan area. We've got genealogies that go back, 200, 300 years, and all the way across, that line. There's stories about marriage relationships course, we don't know, who's living there, but I sort of look at each village as probably having some elite people in the village, and we know ethnographically there was higher standard people that would have had these long distance relationships, well outside of their territory, allowing them to access exotic materials and high status food or really coveted foods like this. So while we're not going to find cameras behind every single village, I do think that we're probably going to find this sort of pattern replicated behind most of them. Best.
So is the period of highest canvas use correlated with the time frame of highest biface manufacture? That was going on.
Close.
The whole village is really.
Not exactly. So the first cooking pit that we found canvas in was dated to 2000. The biface manufactured about 7 years ago. But the 2,000 years ago date does correlate with things that Roy has talked about, increased interregional interaction. So some of you might know Jesse's work with nephrite. There's a real spike in the amount of nephrite that's distributed from the Ritchie Canyon down to the island. And that's it's a very constricted spike. It's not something that carries on even though those relationships were forged at that time. It also correlates with, as Roy's talked about, the proliferation of carved stone and wood and like bone artifacts. There's a lot of things that are somewhat distinctive to that time period. And those carved stone materials, which is, they're really quite distinctive, they're also found all the way from the interior all the way to the coast. So there's just a lot going on at that time. Well,
The lithics that you sourced, did any of them come from the interior, Little Italy?
yeah, Arrowstone Hills. And then there's a big, I didn't show you all the other, there's a couple hundred bifaces. There's a lot of chert also. So unsourceable, but we know it came from somewhere in the interior. Sorry.
I have a couple of questions. The first one kind of deals with the bifaces that you were talking about, on how you think that materials brought in the manufactured biface and then were planning on distributing them later. Were they distributing them within the community or outside of the community? Or
Yeah, good question. I have to demonstrate both of those first.
Yeah.
My sense is that with the magnitude of biface production going on there, it probably would have been more than just within the community.
And they're feasting on them.
Oh, I can tell Danny's been a little bit annoyed.
No, I'm not.
Maybe they gave them away at the feast.
Party favors.
good party favor.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but my suspicion is that we're going to be able to track, those bifaces over slightly larger areas. And now, I kind of cornered Roy earlier because, he's the guy that's, talked about bifaces that are this big coming from components that date to the same time period. And he said, they're found all the way from Scranton, the north end of the Olympic Peninsula, Marble, across the Fraser Valley. So, of course, whoever's making the bifaces here isn't supplying everybody, but, there is some possibility of there being some, regional, specialist. I do suspect that we're going to find, just like everything else, it really is a very specialized behavior. Otherwise, we'd find biface manufacturing sites all over the place, and there really isn't, it's not a common thing. The only other one in this area is up at the north end of Howe Sound by a village called Sts'ailes. But unlike this one, that biface manufacturing area predated the village by a couple thousand years.
And I also have a question, kind of related to the quartz crystal that you found. Did you see any evidence of quartz crystal microblade manufacturing? Because I know the early sites in the state have that, as well as spirit camp, which is kind of nearby.
Yes, and I didn't know that about Spirit Camp, just down the Harrison.
Yeah.
And
No,
scallops too.
and scat, okay.
We have cores and we have microblades. So
Okay. I have not, sorry, not that I haven't, but it didn't occur here. They appear to be mostly modified.
Do you remember that, I remember this from our field school, so
Wow.
Vanessa Newman, she had the ability to find artifacts literally anywhere. I remember her pulling a quartz microblade core out of a boat launch.
Yeah, that was Main Beach,
Yeah,
that's right down here.
yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, and I know obviously that replicated somewhere else, but.
it did, I don't really know where from. But I'm definitely excited about exploring, the connection between quartz crystal and some of these archaeological sites and production, but also obviously some of the more maybe ceremonial or ritual aspects of rock-based production or activities. We also founded a chocolate rock shelter, place covered in pictographs. And the Harrison is known, across the Bush Settlers world as a place where shamans were really trained. So the fact that you have, a couple like definite quartz quarries, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't know the quarries yet. Definite quartz outcroppings. You have to speculate, right? To keep things interesting.
Safe here, Morgan.
Save your things.
Any other questions for Morgan? Morgan, thank you so much.